The next topic up is a discussion with Art Patron and Rick Canary on a sludge drying equipment at the town sewer plant. And correct me if I'm wrong, is this the first time that, Rick, you're going to be presenting to this board as an employee of the town of Webster? And we're very happy about that.
Thanks, Josh.
All right, so last time Rick and I were here, we discussed the long-standing concerns at the treatment facility, and we also discussed some opportunities that lie there. And we were tasked with taking a little bit of a deeper dive into this. And this is what we've come up with. I just got to plug it in the back, Rick. Or did you? All right, just take a second. Okay.
Go ahead.
So as I was saying, last time we met, we talked about some long concerns and issues at the plant. We also talked about some opportunities. As a group, we said, all right, we left that meeting. Rick and I would go back, take a little deeper dive into those issues, into those opportunities, report back. And here we are. So we're going to talk about our current project, where it stands, the needed repairs and asset renewals, most of which were identified in our 2016 PER by Barton and Judas. We're going to touch on potential opportunities and a shift from our water pollution control facility to a resource recovery facility. And then we're going to hit some next steps. So our current project, as we stand right now, installing 3 new secondary clarifiers, a new generator that will power the whole plant that is online. What we want to focus on tonight is our solids handling, our septic receiving, and our aeration process. Some of the things we're going to talk about: digestive repairs, covers, mixing, boilers, heat exchangers, and gas and safety equipment. We're going to talk about solids handling, tank restructuring, septic receiving, great source of revenue, aeration systems, and again, we're going to go back to safety. We're dealing with methane gas, safety. Some potential opportunities that we're going to get out of our digestive repairs, solids reduction, gas utilization. Like I mentioned, septic receiving, revenue. Now we're missing on a great deal of revenue. Reduction of costs and sludge hauling. We're going to talk about how we're going to impact the environment and how aeration will increase our treatment capacity. So at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Rick.
I get the microphone. Well, I can stay right here. I'm good. So, again, as we talked, we're going to hit on asset renewals and the main repairs that need to bring this plant up to date and actually in good repair. So, digestive repairs. I'm sure, as obviously some of you already know about the digestive covers issues. They're both, 2 of them are stuck and they're damaged. What that causes is potential of overflows, because if they're stuck and we're filling it, they're not moving, but the solids are filling that up. So there has to be little working capacity on those digesters. If you draw out too much, you break the water seal and you create gas coming out of there. So those are a big issue. Accessibility and gravel and stone in the pumps. We run into this because maintenance nightmares. As you can see, in these ballasts for these covers is all like a pea gravel, and that tends to get into the digesters now and is getting into pumps and ruining equipment. This equipment right here is your pressure relief valves. Very important equipment on a digester. And to get on there, you have to climb on the roof, climb up on top of there to service those. Not safe on floating covers. That's why really you want to look towards fixed covers. Then you can have a walkway out there, and you get to the equipment and service it and maintain it. Again, we talk safety issues. We do not run the flare because the flare is right next to this, and when you have covers that don't work and the potential gas leaking, you could have an ignition source near your gas, and then you would have a problem with a flying cover. But also you have gas equipment.
Sorry.
Gas equipment in non-classified spaces. That's not Class 1, Div 1. That's a safety issue.
Say that again?
This equipment here, which is your gas accumulators and all your gas equipment, is in non-classified areas. They're supposed to be in Class 1, Div 1 rated rooms, explosion-proof equipment in there, and you don't have all that throughout there.
And this was how they were built by design?
Yes.
So back when this was built, that was appropriate?
It was not code then, just like this flame. Now, if you do anything on your digesters, it has to be 50 away from any ignition source or any gas source. So they're grandfathered in right now, but that doesn't mean they're safe.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm trying.
So our solids handling belt press is over 30 years old. The gravity belt thickener is over 20, and our centrifuge is crawling up on 15 years. The belt press has definitely, in my opinion, reached its useful life. It's a maintenance nightmare right now. It's our only backup for the centrifuge. If that goes down, we cannot process solids because this is just not operational right now. It's not only nickel and diming us anymore. It's getting into some costly maintenance repairs and labor costs. Again, we talked about the stones and stuff in the digesters. This pump was installed this year, approximately $40,000 to keep the rocks and stuff out of there. So we're actually doing Band-Aid work at expensive cost to solve the issues in the digesters. We had just last week, replaced this roller here. That roller, which was a medium to small roller, weighed over 400 pounds. It took 6 of us to install it. And when you have 6 guys working, that's pretty much about $1,500 in labor cost, which we're all working on that. And they're about $4,000 each. They are all out of round. This, you can see there's ripples in it, which wears the belts. The belts are $1,200 each. It's just to replace all those rollers, you might as well buy a new machine. I mean, that's where it's at. And every time we fix one, we find something else works. And that's not even including the pistons or the bearings. So it's in desperate need. Again, we're talking about some other assets that we have, tank restructuring. We kind of think that we could do some restructuring with the brick and mortar there, so we're not adding tankage, but stuff that will help us with some solids reduction. Solids reduction and improved process control. And our septic receiving, this was installed mainly for leachate. So when septic haulers dump in there, it gets kind of messy. They're tasked with raking out any collectibles in there on the bar screen, which is in there. And it's the honor system. They fill out a slip, stick it in the building down there, so they could have 1,000 gallons on, and they put 500. I mean, it's just, so we want to look at something to actually have a better removal system, but also a more reliable billing system on that. The aeration system, which is actually a very important part of this process here, is these blowers are over 30 years old, inefficient, and not capable of providing sufficient air, which when you don't have enough air in there, you could create some regulatory issues. I don't know if you can tell in these pictures, you see some bigger bubbles. That's showing that your diffusers are either plugged or they're damaged, and it's supposed to be a fine bubble diffuser, which gives you more surface area to distribute your air throughout it. And when you're having these big bubbles, you're not getting the air distribution. And the nitrifiers, which are taking care of your ammonia in the system, which we have an ammonia limit, they're not getting the oxygen transfer they need. So just a little fact here. Again, why we want to maintain these facilities. Obviously, throughout New York State and United States, infrastructure is reaching its useful life. They were put in the 80s, 70s, and 80s. But, I mean, just a fact about this, there was a study done, or a poll from medical professionals across the world, actually, and they wanted to poll what the greatest 15 breakthroughs were since 1840, and sanitation was number one. Treatment of wastewater and, obviously, clean water. And that was above antibiotics, anesthesia, vaccines, and actually discovering DNA structure. So, I mean, obviously, it's a very important fact. Not that, I mean, we all know that, but I just wanted to touch on that. So with that comes potential opportunities, and it's great when you can, obviously, infrastructure upgrades are needed and asset renewals, but when you can find projects that actually create revenue, cost avoidance to help pay for these projects, it's a win-win situation. So with solids reduction with our digesters, current situation, we have about 80% organic going in, and that's the part that breaks down and into gas. Since the digesters aren't working, we still have 70% organic coming out of it. That's only a 10% reduction, which means that more that we have to put through the centrifuge and send to the landfills. So with the digesters fixed, you would start with your 80, but normal digesters will break it down, and you'd have 50% organic, which is a 30% reduction. But obviously, you need mixing, you need covers, and you need heating. And currently, we do not have those working up to par. But with that reduction, just that reduction in that solid content, you're going to save pretty much somewhere around $1,000 in hauling costs. So you get immediate return on, what did I say? 100,000. You get an immediate return on investment there. But obviously you're doing what it's supposed to be doing, is breaking down solids. So again, anaerobic digestion, now I want to give a big lesson here on digestion, but it's happening all around us. It's kind of the rule of 15. Human digestion, 15 hours. Anaerobic digestion happens in 15 days, and landfill in 15 years or even longer in landfills. They find newspapers that are 30 years old, they can still read them in there because they just don't break down. But what happens is it's methanogenesis. And obviously a simpler term is it's a complex process, but it's basically breaking your carbohydrates down to simple sugars, and it's through a process where you get acetic acid, and the methanogens like acetic acid. And they create methane at approximately about 65% methane, 35% carbon dioxide. And with that biogas, there's a lot of alternatives you can do with that. You can do electric generation with microturbines and reciprocating engines. There's pipeline quality gas, clean it up, pressurize it, put it back into the pipeline. And then there's fueling vehicles. But a lot of those, you need a lot of biogas to do any one of those. There's a lot of infrastructure with those, but there's a lot of biogas. It's like if you have a good, a yogurt factory or some dairy product that's coming in to really give you a high concentrated waste that can give you a lot of biogas, that's when that works. We kind of, in this situation, this isn't going to work right now. So we said we need to look somewhere else. And where were those high costs? And again, it was in the landfill. But also let's look at some revenue options with septic receiving. These kind of, they're septic receiving stations. They come in like a package. And the hauler hooks up, he swipes a card, valve opens, he discharges, there's a rock catcher, heavy debris catcher, and it's pumped into a pit and then pumped to wherever you want it in the process. But you have control over their flow rates, it automatically bills. If they don't pay their bills, you can shut off, the card will swipe and then the valve won't open. If you have issues with plugs or something like that, the valve shuts. So there's a lot of safety features on that, but it's getting a lot of your contaminants out of there. And that's a revenue stream that can be brought in. I mean, you see these tankers going down the road, going to other plants, that could be $270 in the coffers of the wastewater plant or the sewer fund. Smaller tankers, about $135. So to the big ticket item, which is really, I think, why we want to really present this, and not only do we have needs for infrastructure upgrades, but I think there's a way to kind of offset the costs. And we went down to Pennsylvania to look at drying technologies, and we're very impressed with it. Our current operations, we do about 27% solids that goes into the container and out to the landfill. What we saw was 90% solids coming off of their dryers. That's a huge reduction in hauling costs. I mean, currently at about 4,000 tons a year at our high rate of $125 a ton, that's almost $500,000 a year. That's a huge ticket item for the sewer fund. With a 90% solid reduction, that's 63% more reduction than what we'd be doing right now. That's a savings of somewhere around $300,000 a year. It can quickly start to pay for the infrastructure needs with the hauling costs. So I guess what we're really talking about here in another kind of way to look at this is our current sludge going into a container, and this is kind of our typical container that we fill. If we were to do the drying, that takes about 7 hours to fill. So we fill a container in one day, in a full shift running during the day. If we were to do the dryer, how long would it take to fill that same container? Obviously it wouldn't be 1 day, 2, 3. No, it would take 7 days to fill that same container instead of 7 hours. Means you're only hauling out of there every week and a half instead of every day. And the benefits not only of the huge saving in cost, but there's other benefits to that. And it's environmentally friendly. It's a fertilizer. You're reducing the road miles across the roads of Webster with these trucks hauling across there, which is an infrastructure upgrade that would be lessened. Reducing the diesel fuel that whoever's using. That's just not something that's being used. So there's a lot of environmental benefits to this. So the dryer technology we looked at is kind of similar to this thing here. It's produced a Class A biosolid. Class A biosolid can be put on any crops, any land. Class B is for not direct human consumption. This will qualify for Class A. It could be given away, it could be sold. Obviously, it becomes a product. The one we looked at comes in sections, so it's modular. So you can say, okay, they know what we're putting through there, so they can set it up for 2 5x5s, 3x6, 2 10x10s. And it utilizes the biogas that we'll now be producing more of because the digester is working to heat this. It cycles the heat through and uses biogas or natural gas. And you can run it 24 hours potentially. The place we went to, they turn it on Monday, and then they turn it off on Friday afternoon. Runs 24 hours, and they're only 8-hour shift day. So there's an opportunity if you're backed up in solids, you need to move some more through, you kind of can turn it on and let it run. Again, the benefits of this, it's a fertilizer. It can be given to farmers, local communities. It also can be given or sold to companies that need to have their portfolio of renewable energy. This is considered renewable energy. It can be burned. It also can be added as a concrete and cement additive to companies that need to put additives to their cement. So you have cost avoidance with the potential of revenue generation. I think this is another driving factor, not only that we're paying a lot. Seneca Meadows, which we bring it to currently, is closing in 2025. We have a current contract renewal coming up in 18 months. We are getting odor complaints from landfills, and this isn't typical to us. I'm hearing through the industry, landfills do not want biosolids anymore. Not that they don't want it anymore, it's driving that there's a factor that they can only accept so much of it. It's not here yet, but there are other states and certain parts in New York State. Because it's not municipal waste in the aspect of the garbage, it doesn't sit well in landfills. So I think it was Pennsylvania had a whole site of landfill just cave out because of the structure to your biosolids wouldn't be like the 90% that we would be producing with the dryer technology.
This is a change in thinking because
It is.
Many years ago, the addition of this waste was supposed to help decompose everything else
Right.
in the landfill and produce the gases that they were trying to get.
But they're actually limiting it to the percentage that you can take of biosolids. And so what they're doing is they're ratcheting down that. So municipalities are having to find other avenues to do with their biosolids. And then when you have the specter of landfills closing, That's one of the biggest ones in the state. You could probably put a bunch of the other ones into this one, it's so big. They take from 3 other states too. With them closing, the ripple effect, other landfills, that 125, it will not go any time, it may go up. So really, I think the vision has to look ahead and say, okay, we need to get ahead of this before we're behind the 8 ball, and not set up to handle that issue that's coming down the road. So, again, necessity brings opportunity. We need infrastructure upgrades. We need to upgrade the digesters, solids handling equipment, the sludge hauling solution. We need to look at, there's different types of dryer technologies out there, but that looks like the way to go. And with those necessities and needs comes opportunities. With the digester, you get a reduction in solids, which is a savings. With the solids handling, you get a reduction in solids. Revenue generation from septic receiving aeration increases capacity, treatment capacity. Then we can bring in more waste from outside. The sludge hauling solution, I think, again, another factor of this is you have a large reduction in hauling cost, but you can also, there's other small municipalities that have to get rid of theirs. You may become a merchant facility and say, okay, instead of $125 a ton, you bring it to us for $50 a ton. We're going to knock that solids down by 90%. We're going to revenue off of treating their sludges, and they have a solution to theirs, and then we become some type of merchant facility. But then again, that's first to table. You know, that may be out there, somebody may be thinking that, but what we're talking about here is all baseline, is just fixing what you have and getting a reduction of 90% solids and still sending it to a landfill or giving it away because it's Class A vital solid. That's it. The upside is revenue generation from bringing in outside waste and potentially selling that product. So there's, baseline is very positive, but then there's so much upside to this.
Is there anybody else that's selling this stuff?
Most places that we find are just giving it away. They give it to farmers. They community members can come and take it. Obviously, if it becomes something that becomes a commodity, then you have that upside to.
Is there an odor to it?
No. Want to hand them out?
I'll just take your word for it.
No,
You gotta see it.
it's really,
I asked if there were going to be souvenirs from your trip.
we brought this from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, sir.
All the way from Pennsylvania.
That is a fertilizer.
This looks like my wife's.
I'm good.
Yeah, earthy.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
It's high in phosphorus and nitrogen, which is good for the environment and for the crops.
Patty, you can open it.
Well, wait.
I'm glad you sniffed it right in without the mask staying there.
It's a little bit like charcoal.
Yeah.
Art, do you want these back, or can we keep these as souvenirs?
No, those are take-home gifts.
Chachis?
Put them in the stocking.
Put them underneath the Christmas tree.
Don't put them anywhere near the coffee drawer.
That's right. Give them to your kids, tell them to crushed up Oreos.
No, jeez.
No, go ahead. No, you do this.
Okay, so, again, we're kind of rehashing a lot of the points, but the economics outlook, there's benefits of this asset renewal and upgrades. We're reducing water content in the solids, reducing hauling costs, better process control, obviously some avenues for increased revenue, safer work environment, which is huge, increased resiliency and more environmentally friendly. And then there's the benefits of the upside, elimination of hauling costs altogether, potentially, product to be marketed, free or sold, and then a merchant facility, which other plants are going to be going through the same issue with their landfill and hauling costs.
So I think, Barry, you had just said it, and I couldn't agree with you more. This is a new way of thinking. This is not business as usual. We have an opportunity, and I think we need to grasp it, not only for today, but the future of the town, the future of that plant. That's the way I think we need to go. There's some new technologies, new ways of thinking. We have a great opportunity sitting in front of us. So, next steps. Here's your options. and the way I see it, do nothing. Do nothing and wait for a village decision. The results? No control over rising disposal costs and a failing infrastructure at the plant. Maintenance costs continue to rise exponentially. Or create and implement a sustainable plan for the town of Webster and their treatment facility. I challenge the board to commission a study of what we talked about within the next 45 days. And I will say this, because I know it's coming. How much? There's grant money available for a study to at least partially help with that. We see the urgency of these landfills closing. We see our costs just rising and rising. We have an opportunity to reduce those costs exponentially and create some revenue streams. You've all known far more than I, septic receiving. We're taking close to zero now. Not too long ago, we're upward $200,000. Our plant can't take it, the septic receiving can't take it. So, great opportunities, and like Rick said, it's not just spending money. We can show a value, we can show a return. From the young man in the corner.
Do you have any estimates on the total cost of your entire proposal?
No,
We do
and that's
not.
where that study would really get us into the weeds, get what we're looking to do. This is kind of a direction for us, but yeah, you'd have to get a little deeper into the weeds for some cost estimates.
Right.
How old was the dryer you looked at in Pennsylvania?
That was brand new. They just put it in, and they had dryer technology before. Right? So this was a newer dryer, and they were extremely happy with it.
They
Well,
know
you're a new employee to
Yes.
the town of Webster. I was just wondering if you could just give the rest of the board, and for those at home watching, just briefly, what's your history, your background and stuff?
I worked for, retired from the city of Rome, 35 years, last 8 of it being chief operator. Actually spent 7 years to get a combined heat and power project, which is still in the process of being built as I left there. That we are going to be creating electricity, take us off the grid. That project will be cash flow positive year 1 with digesters, solids handling. So I kind of had some background in this
Right.
issue, and then I went in the private sector for 6 months, but the private sector sent me to Webster to manage the plant, and that's where the marriage happened.
Great, thanks. So, as far as studies go, you don't have the ballpark of what it would cost for a study, but as you said, there's grant money. I greatly appreciate everything that you guys have presented tonight. I think it's very important. I've seen those digesters, and when I walk through, we need to do something. We need to look 10, 20 years down the road.
Exactly.
And from a sludge hauling standpoint alone, it's hurting the taxpayers
Oh, yeah.
tremendously. So if there's the technology out there that we can look to reduce those hauling fees alone, and add on the fact that they're going to be closing that landfill, I think we're duty bound to look into having a study done, so we know what the cost will be and the benefits will be.
They're controlling the landfills,
Right.
and whoever is controlling this plant.
Sure.
This time, you guys kind of take control and say, okay, no, we're going to do it this way, and now we're controlling.
Yeah.
We can say where it goes.
I agree.
I feel much better about this approach than we did a year ago, tremendously, because Rick being on board, we did go down and view this technology and, asked a lot of questions, did our research. I think this is a great path to start going down, to narrow that funnel, work with some other professionals, and see where it leads us.
The one that you saw in operation was brand new. Did they tell you how old the one prior to that was?
Melvin, I can definitely find out for you.
Just curious what the lifespan of one of these would be.
Yeah, that's a good question.
And the plant we did see, it was a similar size plant as ours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Andy, Bill?
What the cost of that dryer, what was the cost just for that?
For just the dryer, I do not know that.
We don't know that.
So I guess the purpose of the study would be to gather all that information, tell us what all of this would cost, and how long it would take to construct, and also what would be the time that we would get our money back from it.
Yes, yes.
Exactly. I mean, it would go into structural, it would go into equipment. It'd definitely drive down into the details. It would definitely give us a much deeper overview of where we are.
And NYSERDA has a program out there that they will fund these type of studies. Anything that would kind of be geared towards energy savings and stuff like that, which is your aeration, more efficient equipment, they will fund part of that. So there is funding to help offset some of the costs for the study.
Also, the good thing is the 2016 PER created by Barton and Judas, that will play into this study. Some of this work was already done. We've had, I think 2 years ago, I had digester specialists on site, so they're familiar with our facility. So all that work definitely will play into the study.
And Art and Rick, that good segue to a couple questions I have. I obviously am new to the game on this, and I say new to the game because the project that we are just about to finish with the new secondary clarifiers, since I wasn't involved in that process back 15, 16, 17, whatever, I don't know if any type of return on investment was done, or if there is any return on investment of secondary clarifiers, or if that was just a situation where the secondary clarifiers that we had on the campus were just so shot that, guess what, you're going to have to put $12 million into this, or you can't run a sewer plant.
I can speak a little bit to it, maybe you guys can add to it. I know that the state of the secondaries were in such disrepair, they needed to be replaced. I know the DEC there was not a consent order, but they were pushing for, obviously, replacement of those. As far as the generator is concerned, they wanted to see a generator that would actually run the facility. So I think that drove it, but I think number 3, the clarifier number 3 coming off the rails yet again, really pushed the issue and not having the capacity.
Literally off the rails. I said
Literally off the rails,
yeah.
So
That was effectively called phase 1 of the sewer treatment plant revitalization or whatever. Is that true? I mean, the first. And the good news, bad news, as we look at the second one is phase 2, which Barton and Judas has already put together. And really put together a derivation of it for a town sewage plant only, and a derivation of it for if we go for a regional plant, like you put in the second to last page here on our options, do nothing or wait for the village. I'm assuming the village decision is whether we go regional.
correct.
So we already have some derivation of a PER, like you said, from Barton and the Judas, that gave what the cost was going to be of the digesters and all of those things, whether we went town only or whether we went regional. Everything you showed here, well, some of it's already in that. I think the digester repairs or new digesters or whatever.
Correct.
But I go back to the good news, bad news. The bad news of looking at this as we go into phase 2 has always been there is that, wow, we're just coming off of $12 million. Adams, you're here, you got 25%. We had grant on that, but we did have to probably, I think the other $9 million was bonded. Okay. So now we were always looking as we went into phase 2, And up on the hills, I like to say up where the digesters are, okay, when can we do that? When would the timing be right to do that? When we just finished phase one. Now, phase one, it sounds like, and I wasn't here for it, was pushed forward by necessity because it was failing and it was going to be a real problem. It came off the rails, right? There's some phase two aspects that you presented, Art, and now Rick, you come in, of those digesters, that there's some feel of necessity when you're talking about covers that are floating, danger issues, DEC, EPA, all right? But this might be the first time that I've heard in the year that I've been here, the potential to tweak phase two, and I don't know what that tweak costs. Am I right in assuming that the commission of the study would be Barton and LaJudas tweaking phase two's already written up plans of how much it's cost?
I would agree with you, yes, this will be a modified phase two. When we got together last time, we talked about solids handling, solids reduction, and opportunity. And that's what.
And this would bring into, the study would show what type of return on investment.
Exactly.
Because the phase two, and I could be wrong, Patty, you've been very much involved in this in the last year. The phase two cost, regardless of whether it's the town-only plant or it's the regional plant, really, we've never gone over anything about return on investment. This would enter into a situation, and Bill, I'm right with you. I said day one when they were coming back from Pennsylvania, and you guys were giddy. You got to see this sludge drying machine. It could take us from $500,000 of sludge hauling to zero. Because this stuff, the farmers will come and get, or we might even be able to sell it, right? Art, what was the first question I asked you?
How much?
How much does it cost?
Well, it's not just that drying, it's all the reconfiguration that needs to be done at the plant itself right now. That's a substantial cost.
Phase two, if it already is slotted for $10 million, and I don't know if that, them coming in and do this study, the $10 million, and don't quote me on that number for phase two, none of it has to do with a return on investment. It's very similar to phase one. We're repairing and replacing out of necessity, so the plant can keep moving forward. If Barton LaJudas comes in and does this study and says, based on what we were going to do, we tweak it and it costs an extra $1 million to now have this thing, the modular, based on the size, right? And all of a sudden you're like, we cut $500,000 of hauling, and we pick up $200,000 of septage revenue. That's $700,000. Made up numbers. If the addition to phase two that we already were looking seriously at that had no return on investment was $10 million, and the tweak is $11 million, what's the return on investment? Do you think the return on investment is the $700,000 of additional revenue and cost savings on the $11 million phase two now? Or is it $700,000 on the tweak to go from $10 million in the phase two that we were looking at to $11 million? Did I lose anybody in that?
I just want to comment on the phase two, what I looked at. And again, we like to say that it's a 30,000 foot view, but it seemed like it was very, let's say, skim coated. And it seemed like that what we've looked at now is maybe there can be some things done differently that won't cost as much, that may shave whatever they predicted. But when you give an estimate at a 30,000 foot view, in my history, once you get down to the weeds, that price does go up. I'm just telling you, it does go up. They can say it's this, but all of a sudden when you get in there, but we've looked at it differently and say maybe we can do things a little differently. Utilize brick and mortar that's there instead of building new tankage and new buildings and stuff like that. Now you save some. So that's where this study will get into it and get down deep and say, okay, let's do it this way. And you talk to different people and say, okay, we're going to do this with our tanks instead of this. And then you kind of get a little more finite number.
And Rick, I couldn't agree with you more that phase two was definitely, I'd even say 40,000 foot. And it was absolutely asset replenishment. And just as we were talking about in here, now we're driving the ship. We're driving the end product. What do we want in our plant? As opposed to just asset replenishment, doing business as usual.
Yes, Barry.
Does this will replace the centrifuge and all of that type of
No,
operation?
no, I mean, just, again, and the thought is, keep the centrifuge, because obviously that still dries it to 27%, and you want drier stuff going through your dryer, because that's less, that has to work. It would
So
be
this would
probably,
go before the centrifuge or after?
this goes after the centrifuge.
Okay.
So you would keep the centrifuge, the thought is maybe get rid of that belt press, which obviously has become a nightmare, and have another backup centrifuge.
And the only reason they had that belt for press they kept around was just for backup.
Exactly, and it's not that right now, so they have no backup. So if the centrifuge went down,
We'd be
you have to
hauling
haul liquid, and that's very expensive.
I don't know how that fun that is.
So I like to talk about these projects that there's need, but there is, as you talked, there is cost savings, cost avoidance, revenue generation. You had a project that there was no, I mean, in a business world, return on investment, I know we want to look at it that way, but what is, they always talk across, what's the payback on it? What's the payback on it? But what you feel is a payback may not be what you feel is a good payback, so I guess it's what everybody at the end of the day sees this study and says, okay, I think this works, but there is needs there. And when you have a project that maybe can help pay for those needs, those look attractive.
And Rick, I gotta tell you, and obviously return on investment is such a floating number, for lack of better terms, because, hey, I watched some board meetings on TV, and the town board meeting, the budget for the 2020, the public hearing, whatever, that was in August of 2019, one of the items really hammered on was, we're going from $250,000 HUD sludge hauling a year to $500,000 because of the reasons you just gave. And then the reasons you gave in this, where these places are closing in 5 years. That concerns me, as well as should concern the board, that will a new landfill say, I can name my price and you're held hostage to it? Maybe it's gonna be $1 million in sludge hauling in 5 years because we're the only game in town.
You know what you can bank
They're
on?
already doing
It's
that.
not going down. So you can bank on it. And
Yeah.
just what you said, you need to look 10 years down the road. You need to look and say, okay, we need to do something now because it's more cost, it costs more to do it reactively than proactively.
Well, let me ask you this, I mean, Art, I appreciate your nice blue or teal or whatever, I'm a little colorblind. You challenged us to commission a study within 45 days, okay? You said there's grant monies available. Would the study, at the end of the day, most likely be Barton and LaJudas time and materials?
I would have to say yes for a couple of reasons. One, they're familiar with our plant. Two, they've done the PER. And three, Rick, you can back me up on this, they are the foremost digester experts in upstate New York. And if
They
you
have
want
a
to
few
expand on
people they've
that.
hired that in the industry that were on my side jumped over, and they know anaerobic, have lived it, breathed it, failed with it, succeeded with it, and so I feel they have the expertise to really guide us and help us. I think I think we kind of have an idea, but then we just need them to really.
Well, I mean, we have a relationship with Barton and LaJudas, to the point where, let me ask you this, and I mean, if we said, Barton and LaJudas, give us an estimate of what this thing that you just came up with, what that study's gonna cost.
We can do that. I did not do that.
Would you guys like to know what that study's gonna cost?
Sure.
Yeah. I would.
I'd like to have some kind of an estimate, yeah.
Yeah, and I'd like to know what the grant,
Well, I was gonna say, maybe we can talk to Matt Chatfield or whatever, and in parallel,
well, I'm
Because
sure
he
that
was
Barton
asking me
Judas
about
knows
the
what those
study.
grants are as well.
Yeah.
probably you have, you know what? Yes. Good point. Good point.
So I did not ask and reach out to Barton and Judas because I wanted to have this conversation first.
Sure.
I didn't think it was fair
No.
for me to go out and do that. I know numbers, we all want to know how much, right?
Right.
But I have been, Ken Knutson, the vice president, he's reached out to me a few times over the last couple months, knowing that, one, something may be going on in the village, but we need to do something with our digesters. Rick and I have talked to him, and they have a whole team dedicated just for solids handling.
Let me ask you this question. Obviously, no decision has been made whether the village keeps theirs or we go regional. What impact would this study have on, would they look at a regional plan, or would they just look at it from our plant home, our own perspective?
They're going to look at it any way we want. I think I agree with Rick. We need to take care of our own first,
Yes.
but also looking at the ability to take in other sludge as well, being a merchant facility.
Right.
So that's where I go back to, we're in a much better position now. We're not just doing asset renewal. We're guiding the ship of what the town needs, what our operators need, what our chief needs, and what is best for us.
Can I make a suggestion? And I think it kind of fits into, I'll take your challenge, Art, of the 45 days, but it might not be what you envision specifically of commissioning a study within 45 days. Can we target the workshop of Thursday, January 28th, which, if my math is correct, is about 48 days from now?
Okay?
That if we work in tandem on this, that Barton and Judas comes in here and presents to the board not only what they think the study will cost, but maybe a little bit of taking this very nicely done thing and tying it in and explaining to the board, how it might tie into the PER that's already been done for phase 2.
Can I ask what level of work you want them to do from now until then? I mean, you're asking for, I'm trying to clarify what you're expecting at that 20.
Well, the clarifiers are done. We're talking digesters right now, okay? Rick,
I'm just trying to digest, okay?
have them do a scope of work of this.
Okay.
And if they think, when I say a scope of work, a scope of bidding the work.
Okay.
Now, the one thing I've become very comfortable with from a standpoint is that phase 1, I know what it cost. And I saw how Art has managed that project and managed Barton LaJudas as the engineers on it. Is it still targeted to come in under budget?
Yes.
I like the way
That's a
you
rarity,
managed that.
by the way.
Well,
So,
you know what?
congratulations, that's great.
I will say that's a team effort of Barton and Judas, our contractors, and honestly, guidance from Paul as a sounding board. Are we done with it? No, we're not done with the project. We'll be done in 5 months. We have some things still going into it, you bet, but we'll be under budget.
That's fantastic.
And I'm aware that, look, they've already, we paid them for the study or whatever of, this is our 30,000, 40,000 viewpoint of what phase 2 will cost. And I remember that now, that when we were in the sewer, it is not hammered down. So that might work to our advantage as far as, because really, any study they do, whatever that study costs, I think would start getting to the hammering down of phase 2. And I would like to see if they could say, this is what it's going to cost for a town only, and this is what it's going to cost for a regional approach. I don't know how much up on that hill, I can't remember, of the digesters really changes from town only to regional. I can't off the top of my head remember, to be honest with you.
Adding a regional approach would be adding a digester.
Okay.
The phase 2, the original phase 2, not the modified phase 2, if you will. The original phase 2 included our headworks, our bar screens, things like that. It added a fourth primary. But I will say that phase 2 originally did not include septic receiving. I added a number placeholder in there recently because it's so important to the facility. So, and that's where it goes back to the 30,000 foot. It's not really
I
into it.
So Rick, let me ask you, from your experience in the off-the-grid, if this plant had all its electricity and power done by our gas that we create from those digesters that we're not doing right now, Paul, how much are we paying in utilities a year at this plant?
That's another thing. Utilities are cheap nowadays, so really that's another aspect why they aren't really as attractive anymore to do. Really, your pipeline quality gas, you get your RINs, you get, those, that's where your bang for your buck is, but that's some big infrastructure to make pipeline quality gas.
So the main expense cutter is the hauling of the sludge.
I think that's the driver of this.
And the main revenue producer is the Chamberlains and whatever coming in and dropping.
No, well, another revenue could be bringing in outside sludges with other places that are gonna have problems getting rid of their sludges.
Because we had foresight.
Because what you can do with these dryers, it could be designed for what we need to put through in an 8-hour shift. But if we're bringing outside, then we can turn it on and run it for the 24 hours. And now you're treating others' waste when you're not there, but it's modular in the aspect that it can be designed for what you need for that day, but then you can also run it continuously.
Okay. Is that a plan that the 28th of January is the target date to come back to, whether it's Barton and LaJudas? I take it that you'd be working with Barton and LaJudas, showing them this if they haven't already seen it
They
yet.
haven't seen it.
So they get an idea of, take your 40,000 foot, take this, what's it gonna cost to come up with the study? Which I'm gonna say the study end deliverable is really the cost of doing phase 2, either town only or regional, but not from 30,000 foot, from what we think it's gonna cost. Is that a reasonable assumption that that's what we're going to come out of after this study?
I would like to clarify, have you clarify for me? Because remember, phase 2 included bar springs and a fourth primary. We can include that almost as an a la carte thing, just so we have all of phase 2 covered. Correct? That's what we want to do.
Yeah, and in parallel to this, if we find out from Barton and LaJudas that they're going to bid this study at, I don't know, I'm going to pull a number out, $50,000. But oh, don't worry, we got the grant application in and it's a wash. Great. That'd be a much easier decision on January 28th, won't it?
I'm not, the decision on January 28th is whether we're gonna do the study or not?
Yes.
Why are we waiting?
Barton and LaJudas got to come in and show us what they think based on the
What it's gonna cost?
whatever.
Well,
okay.
Is this a
Yeah, we don't-
$5,000?
You're not gonna give them carte blanche to go do that
We
stuff.
don't, and we don't know what the grant
Okay,
ability.
Tom,
Yeah.
they won't, on January 28th, they're not going to give us the cost because we haven't commissioned the study. I think we're looking for a scope of work defined and them giving us a cost to do the work.
right. Cost to
We have to
do the
commission the
study.
study first, and then commission them to do the work, and then we'll get the cost. So I think you guys
That
are
was the
looking,
reason
correct me if I'm wrong, I think you're looking for the cost for the,
So the
for the
cost to
study.
do the work that needs to be done at the plant, right?
Yes.
But there's a cost for the study, which you're gonna ask them what the cost for that study is, right?
And what grants are available.
Right, and we don't need to wait,
You want to show up on the 14th of January at the first workshop with what they think the cost of the study is going to
I'd love to,
Cost of the study?
because we
Yes.
gotta work out the scope and where it all works. Yeah.
Does that give them enough time?
So you need to have the cost of the study and the availability of grants.
Absolutely.
Right.
Those are the two things we need to know.
Okay.
Yep.
We have a deal. Cost of study, availability of grant for the study. January 14th workshop.
Okay.
What if they could get it to us earlier than that?
We don't have another workshop until January 14th, so unless you want to have next week's board meeting, the org meeting on the 30th, which is, that would not be an appropriate
No.
venue for this, and the first regular board meeting of next year is Thursday, January 7th.
I'm comfortable with that.
Okay.
I don't want to rush through this. I want to make sure their scope is accurate. I know it's going to be a lot of bouncing back and forth. It's very easy to say, this is what we want. But as you said, and we both well know, once we dig a little deeper, you know, what do we really want?
Well, you can set that date, and then if you find out that you need more time to complete your objective, then, okay.
So,
Thanks for the presentation.
No, I think the presentation is awesome because we really have a good understanding of this going into the study, and I think that's really important as a board to know it all and be able to realize the importance of it and the value.
Now, thank you for listening.